It's Fulton County officials being threatened. It's the Fulton County sheriff having to investigate that. Then it's the Fulton County sheriff being threatened and the FBI having to investigate that. Then it's the FBI being threatened, FBI officials and FBI agents themselves being threatened, and the FBI having to investigate that. It's the judge in one of the Trump cases being threatened. It's another judge in another one of the Trump cases being threatened. It's the grand jurors in one of the Trump cases being threatened. It's the prosecutor in one Trump case being threatened. It's the prosecutor in another Trump case being threatened. It's a federal prosecutor in the Hunter Biden investigation getting, quote, such a barrage of credible threats that she had to seek security help from the U.S. Marshals Service. It's public health workers being threatened and harassed. It's the head of the CDC getting death threats. The head of the CDC. It's the staff of the National Archives being threatened. Sure, why not? Quote, the National Archives has been hit with a wave of threats since the FBI retrieved classified records from Trump's Mar-a-Lago club. It's the IRS being threatened. Quote, IRS launches safety review after right-wing threats. Republicans in Congress repeating baseless claims long made by extremists, experts say, potentially puts federal workers in danger. It's more than a dozen people now federally criminally charged with making threats to election workers all over the country.
White America has always been too violent for anyone else to coexist with them. America has always been under mob violent rule. It has always been overlooked because this mob violent rules has always been mostly applied to Black America. Now you see the white mob violent rule is being used against white America.
Now it's Republican U.S. Senator, former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, telling his biographer about serving members of Congress in both the House and the Senate, confiding in him that they have taken specific votes in Congress that benefited Trump, specifically because they were afraid for their physical safety if they did not. They would have voted in a way not beneficial to Trump, but they felt physically threatened, and so they voted in a way beneficial to Trump. Quote, think of your personal safety. Think of your children. Why put your wife and children at risk?
America is now governed by mob rules. Laws and policies are now being passed due to the threat of violence. Black America has suffered from the Donald Trump effect about the media being lies just as well as the mega group crowd has. I failed to pay attention to the news, and I failed to understand what is going on politically in our environment. Democracy has ended in America, and we haven't even noticed. It had never fully existed with Black America. We have never been fully afforded democracy. Mob rule has always been used as a means to deny Blacks access to democracy. And the fear that Blacks are gaining in number and will have access to democracy has turned whites against whites because they have made the Democratic Party synonymous with Blacks. And that fear of Black people has infuriated white people to the point where they have a rule or ruin concept with America, and they're at a stage where they are prepared to ruin America.
Marks 123 years since the 1898 Wilmington, North Carolina massacre. White supremacists overthrew a legally elected multiracial government in the city with a majority Black population during the Reconstruction era. This year, the community came together for a unity service in remembrance of the estimated 60 to 250 people killed by the mob. Historians have compared the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol to the 1898 massacre, and they point out that the mob in Wilmington wanted to suppress the Black vote, believing it would be fraudulent.
The summer of 1919 marked a breaking point behind the ever-rising tensions surrounding the migration during World War I of African Americans from their southern homes to cities in the North and Midwest. Once the war was over, thousands of white soldiers returned home to find their factory jobs filled by previously Southern blacks. Combined with an economic slump in post-war America, tensions snapped between whites and blacks over increased competition in both the jobs and housing markets, causing an outbreak of largely white-on-black rioting to break out simultaneously in many American cities. During the summer of 1919, riots across the U.S. would break out in cities like Washington, D.C., Knoxville, Tennessee, Omaha, Nebraska, and more than 36 other American cities. None, though, was as dramatic as the events that occurred in Chicago. On July 27, 1919, African-American Eugene Williams had gone with some friends to swim at their local beach. In the midst of having fun, Eugene inadvertently crossed the line that separated the white and black sides of the beach, prompting a group of white men to stone Eugene before he could safely return to the black side of the line. Eugene was struck in the head and subsequently drowned, and when the police arrived on scene to collect accounts by several eyewitnesses, the officers refused to arrest the white men responsible for Eugene's death, instead arresting a black man for no logical or apparent reason. Before the day was over, white and black mobs had mobilized throughout the city, rioting for the next 5 days until local and federal authorities called in 6,000 National Guardsmen and infantry in an effort to restore order. The Guardsmen were positioned around the black belts of Chicago to curtail any further attacks by whites. By the time the violence had ended, 38 people were dead, most of them African American, along with 537 injuries. Many African Americans fled back to their southern homes during the violence, while 1,000 mostly African American citizens would be left homeless due to arson attacks. While racial fighting during the Red Summer was contained mainly to northern and mid.
Let's be clear. See, they burnt down your buildings. They burnt down your houses. White people have always been too violent for us to coexist with them. You have to understand that these people were swimming in a lake, in a lake with all type of animals. But they killed the man for crossing a line, a black man, and at this time, blacks and whites have coexisted and have children together.